live.
Good evening, everybody. This is RAGIN with, and our special guest this evening, William S. Quinton. This is episode 55 of RAGIN with. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this out with your friends because we are simulcasting to Geek Insider as well as RAGIN AVC. Hit the button! And while you're doing that, I'm going to hit our intro. We'll be right back with William Quinton.
RAGIN.
Good evening, everybody. We are running a little bit late, but that's okay. We're going to spend our hour with William here, and we're going to talk about 47 Furious Tales. Issue 3 is on Kickstarter right now, and if you're paying attention and checking out the show notes, you're going to see all of his links, the links to the Kickstarter, the links to his social media. Hit the button, follow him everywhere. Just don't peek at his windows, because that's weird. I'm going to drop the card now. Hi.
How's it going, ladies?
Doing well. For some reason I thought today was Friday, and I was just like, yeah, I don't have anything going on. But no, Nita's booked us for you. It's in fact Thursday, and we have Daphne tomorrow.
That's gonna be a fun show too. Yeah.
We booked out. I mean, it was like boom, we were booked, and then people started coming in, and I was like, okay, we're gonna run an extra day this month.
Yeah, like running late and everything. I didn't even have time to put on my makeup, so I've got all kinds of shine going on here. Woo! Hope you guys aren't blinded by that.
Natural beauty.
And glistening. Anyway, so do we call you William? Do we call you Sam? Do we never call you late for dinner? What's up?
Sam is fine, and I'm never late for dinner. So
neither am I.
That's not something I've been guilty of in a long, long time.
I could stand to miss a meal or two, but hey, that's besides the point. We're going to talk about your creative journey. Cool. Okay, so one of the hardest things I've ever done, and this is only in the past 2 years, I'd say, is getting on the learning curve and learning comic books, learning graphic novels. One of the hardest things. And I'm so glad that I didn't do it when I was younger, because I don't think I would have had the patience or the discipline to do this. Mm-hmm. So when did you start your comics creator journey, and what in the hell were you thinking?
Well, I actually didn't start until about late 2017, 2018. I founded Sonoma Publishing in 2017 when we started releasing role-playing game books. And I knew from the beginning of it that I wanted to get into releasing comics, because it's something I had always wanted to do, as far back as I can recall into my teen years. But the thing about it, I can't draw at all. it's pretty bad. Stick figures are challenging. I'm literally going to be watching some how-to videos to draw for Travis's Indie-tober this month, so I can thoroughly embarrass myself. But I was fortunate in that I had been commissioning art for the RPG books for some very, very talented people. Many of whom were graduates from the Kubert School, so professionally trained people who were taught and trained how to create comics in the first place. So when it came to a point where I'm like, you know what, we wanted to go ahead and start on making comics, had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So I took in the research I had done was, of course, everyone goes back to the old, how to break into comics, how to create comics. There were comic books about that were done by, I believe, by Anarch Press, if I'm not very much mistaken, which I have here somewhere. and went through that material. I went through some YouTube channels like Tyler Carpenter's Draw and Talk, was watching Larry Patrick Higgins for Niobe, paid a lot of attention to Mike Shea and what he's been doing with Miskatonic High. And of course, Madeline Holly Rossing, who creates Boston Metaphysical Society. These are some folks who I hold in really high regard as far as their creative energies. And Adam Watson with the Darkslinger Mafia podcast and Darkslinger Comics, who has mentored me in a lot of things regarding comics and crowdfunding. And then I got an unexpected ace in the hole, because when I pitched a handful of comic series ideas, Alexia Veldhausen jumped, feet first into 47 Furious Tales. And Alexia is, of course, a graduate of the Kubrick School. She had won scholarships while at the Kubrick School. She's remarkably well trained, very knowledgeable. She's been, a comic fan since she was very, very little, and probably knows more about comics than any other 5 people, I know in my personal life. So getting to work with her kind of whiplashed me into shape really fast. So we approached it from first getting the narrative done. And the initial script was actually very, very crude for issue 1. But as a writer, the first thing I did was lay out the entire story arc, all 12 issues. So I knew what I was including into each. So I didn't run into that common trap where you write yourself into a corner, or where you put breaks in the stories at unnatural spaces. And then went through and did the first script, put it in front of Alexia for editing. We made some revisions on that, went through and looked over it again, did another revision, pronounced it good to go. And that's where we really started. Now, with that, of course, we had to have funding. And RPG stuff doesn't pay really well. Neither do comics.
Indie creation doesn't pay very well unless you hit a home run. Right.
But I had a little bit of money that I could start with from some RPG products that we'd released. So, and that's primarily with Whispers of Persephone, which we had crowdfunded. That art was done by Christian Martinez, who's an absolute legend. And subsequent sales from that and other products had built up enough that we could get a few pieces done initially. And we rushed headlong into crowdfunding issue 1 and failed the first time. So took some time, built up some more funding so that we could get some more art done, more stuff paid for, get the goal down. And we were successful on the second effort. And putting that book into people's hands made every bit of difference in the world. So it was something really remarkable when I cracked open those first boxes, and here I have 500 copies of the first comic book I've ever produced, and then ship them out and get them to their homes, and people are like, "Oh man, I love what you did with this." I'm like, "That's really cool. Let's do number 2." And it's it's really something that gets into your blood once you start making them. It can really hook into you, because there's just something about getting your book made and seeing it go from early concept and doing your edits and then getting your art in and then piecing it all together and getting your colors and your lettering done. And all of that's so exciting. But when it really hits you is right when you lay your hands on it in print. And when you go out and you see it on your local comic book store shelves, or when you're shipping to folks and you see folks on the internet going, "Hey, look what we did. We found this. This is kind of cool." And that just that hits really different, and it can get real deep into your heart and make you look forward to the next book.
So my creative journey starts in prose, right? And so I was like, okay, let me learn this comic books business, the ins and outs and all that stuff, because it's an investment of time and money. And I know for me, the very first time that I said, okay, I have a script ready, now I have to find an artist. What was that like for you?
I was remarkably lucky, because finding an artist has been probably one of the easiest portions of my creative process to date.
We hate you for it. No,
I
just
know,
kidding.
Yeah,
right?
get out of here. Show's over.
I had opened a comic book shop in 1999, and I ended up selling it later that year because I started divorce proceedings. Yay.
Oh, fun.
But the shop I opened, I had met James Lee, Brian Lee, and Robert Lee, and the Lee brothers all grew up to be involved in art in some way or fashion. James Lee, for example, teaches art at an art university. He's actually I don't know how much of this I can reveal. I think he's tenured. Certainly, he's a tenured professor there, and he teaches graphic design and art history and basically everything art related and how to commercialize your art and things like that. Brian ended up going to the Kubert School, and that was a huge boon for me because with Brian having graduated fairly recently, he had a number of his friends from the school who were really looking to get into some projects, and so I kind of fell into a very welcoming community of artists who just needed someone who was going to treat them with respect, who was going to pay them well, who was going to pay them on time, who was going to respect the contracts that were written and make sure that they were getting work. And so I just take and I utilize our crowdfunding revenue to pay the best wages I can, make sure that we're adhering to our contracts, get everything done as professionally as we can. And when I don't have contracts, I promote them to other creators. And surprise, surprise, when you're a good client, people are more than willing to work for you on other projects. So I get to keep working with Brian and Alexia and Kelsey Cohen, and Christian Martinez has been booked ever since we finished Whispers of Persephone, but I'd work with him any day of the week. Nick Capone and Elizabeth Coulthard. The list goes on and on and on. Of course, Tony Ojeda is someone who's done a tremendous amount of work with me as well. And just being able to work with these professionals and see the kinds of results that they're putting out has been remarkably fortunate for me, with far less stress than most other folks have to endure. Which, yeah, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like my ace in the hole. I have to keep refining my writing and honing my craft and trying to learn things about social media and marketing and just doing the best I can every step of the way. But when it comes to the art team, these guys have it down pat. We actually, on issue 2, we had a variant cover by Fernando Ruiz, who's been in the comic book industry for more than 20 years. He's absolutely legendary. Betty and Veronica, Archie. He's done a lot of Betty Page covers, stuff like that. He's been a Kubert School instructor for, I think, 18 years. Just a remarkable man. Loved the experience. Yeah, exactly. That's the Fernando Ruiz cover we got. And that was actually colored by Nick Capone, who is now also a Kubert School instructor. He's worked on several different Sonoma projects himself. And he and I are actually co-developing and bringing a new comic series to the world in January titled Reign of Ages. So we get to show off our fantasy adventurer all-female heroic team next year. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Very cool. I wanted to kind of reverse back a little bit because you said something about the role-playing game books.
Mm-hmm.
What are they, and where can people find those?
Okay.
Are they still available?
They are, yes. Everything that we've released to date is available on DriveThruComics and DriveThruRPG.com, which is our primary point of sale so far. We'll also open the Amazon store probably next year. I was hoping to have it this year, but time just wasn't there for it.
Mm-hmm.
But so what they are is we started with the adventure modules for the open game license for the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And so we started with Tale of the Wizard's Eye, which is ridiculously difficult and probably a good example of what happens when you do your best when you don't know anything about formatting books, and then you learn a little more as you go along. So that book probably needs to be reformatted, but it's a fantastic adventure. I'm very proud of it. It gets a little bit of grief as being extraordinarily difficult for its level range, and I took that and I just ran with it. And so when we launched our Tarot Adventures series, every Tarot Adventure book from issue 1 going all the way until we finish that series is going to be on the high end level of difficulty for their age range. And so when you pick up a Tarot Adventure book, you know you're stepping into the thick of it. You know, you're in the weeds, and it's going to be one of those blood and guts kind of adventures that you're just going to have to watch your step, or it's going to be your last. So it's
I love that, because when you say that, you're kind of getting to the outer bands of like their levels and stuff like that, because there are a lot of people who kind of dumb it down for people, and that can get boring really fast. But a challenge, man, I know people who will spend days without sleep or shower to dominate and win and get to the next level.
The funny part is we make it easy for the game master to make it fun and hard on the players. So there's a lot of game master reference materials in there, a lot of example text for dialogue, a lot of example skill test results in there. So there's a lot of things in there to make it easy on them, so they can run a hard, fun adventure for their group. We also put out a couple of supplement books. So we put out the Steel Road, which was done with myself and Zach Viola, and that is a weapons source book for the 5th edition, and it's one part examination of ancient weaponry and fantasy, and then one part story, and a third of it would be all the tremendous art that Zach did. And that's actually laid out in a sketchbook style, and the whole premise of it is it's supposed to be like the journal kept by this traveling arms dealer as he journeyed around the world peddling the weapons of war. And so there are stories of, strange new weapons he's encountered. And then each weapon has a legendary version, which is usually enchanted or cursed or maybe just different in some ways. And actually, Zach wanted to design a couple of them. And so you can definitely tell the ones that he designed, because they go from some of your typical fantasy stuff to handheld rocket launcher kind of motif. But we spent a lot of time looking at African weapons with that, Middle Eastern weapons. We did a lot with Indian weapons. And then we touched a little bit on Japan and China, and tried to focus a lot on weapons that really haven't seen a lot of play in the supplements from other companies. We did some weapons for the Maori of New Zealand, and then we tacked in a boomerang from Australia. And it's one of the books I'm most proud of. It's been very, very well received. And then we had Whispers of Persephone, which was a book on necromancy. It's the only book I've ever written that's been banned in an entire country.
Wow.
We got banned in the United Arab Emirates for sorcery.
That's so cool.
my artist, I gave him reference images from the research material I took. And halfway through the project, he started complaining he was having nightmares. So I'm like, we must be on the right path. If doing the art's giving him nightmares. But that was actually pretty well received too. That's the highest funding we've achieved on Kickstarter to date for Sonova. We did a little over $8,000 in backing, and we have our absolutely crazy backers to thank for that. And then also we had we'd run out of stretch goals, and so people were like, "You gotta come up with something else to get people motivated." I'm like, okay, and so I talked to Alexia, and we were at I think $6,000 or something like that at the time when we ran out of stretch goals. And I said, what do you think about playing your first D&D game on a live stream if we can get to 8? She's like, sure, I'll do it, thinking it would never happen. And as soon as we announced it, people were like, oh yeah, first timer, boom, 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 boom. We picked up 20 backers in an hour right after and it just kept going. And then we crossed 8K, and then we kept going a little bit. And they're like, can we do more than one session? I'm like, I don't know, I'm gonna be able to talk her into that, guys. And we finished strong with that one. And then we did our live stream of her first ever play session through Kickstarter Live, and I think we had something like 70% of the backers showed up. It's like 130 something people were watching that stream. It was pretty cool.
you were talking about like the research and everything for the weapons.
Yeah.
And do you love the research, or is it just something that you have to do?
That's a little bit of both.
Mhm.
Personally, I was a competitive martial artist as a teenager. I fought in the ring for 7 years, and then also martial arts weapons competition for just as long. And so a lot of primitive weapons like that is something that's very fascinating to me. But with many of these weapons, I wasn't very familiar with, so I had to reach out to people I knew who had experience with them. So I talked to Sifu Kuntz about some of the Chinese weapons. Bill Stock was unfortunately no longer available. He had passed by the time that we had that. I reached out to a friend of mine in the Navy who was married to a lady from New Zealand, and we talked about some of the Maori weapons. Um, with India, I talked to some friends of mine who are from India. They're programmers who live here in Kentucky and who work in the same office I did. And so I showed them some of the stuff I had researched up, and we used their input from their experience out of their own culture to reflect what we were looking for. That was incredibly important too for some of the weapons that had religious significance to the different sects, because we wanted to make sure that we weren't trampling on people's heritage. It's kind of a sensitive subject for me personally, and I think for everyone it should be. And so we tried to treat everything with as much respect as we could, and try to get things as accurately as we could with that. So the
Well,
research was actually
there's
a lot
a
of fun.
certain level of authenticity to that too. I mean, you want to be
Right.
as authentic and true to the weapon and its history. So sorry, I stopped on you. Go
No,
ahead,
no. It's
continue.
really cool. Like one of the things we did particularly was from the example weapons for the weights of the weapons. We got the weights based on museum pieces, not replicas, actual surviving pieces, which is intriguing because like one of the weapons we took was a Kopesh that was actually larger than normal. It's widely considered to be unusual for its size. That was recovered in a tomb back in I think the 1930s. Excuse me. But we used that as the example weight for one of the weapons, and we had one guy who called us out on it. He said this weapon's too heavy, and I'm like, yeah, it's heavier than most pieces, but it's matched up on the ones that was at the time in the Cairo Museum. Um, so that was an important thing to have handy. And the same thing with some of the Japanese Chinese weapons. And then the Maori weapons were a little harder to find. We had to really go far and wide to try and find good data on things like weight and size for them, because you can't just go to Wikipedia and trust what's there. I mean, you have to follow up and actually do your due diligence, because there's no telling, how accurate any one resource is. You have to cross-reference it.
So when you're working on all of these different projects, okay, so you've got the role-playing game book,
Right.
which is totally different, I would assume, from comic book scripts.
Entirely different.
Entirely different. So
Entirely.
you're kind of hitting different points in writing. I mean, obviously, putting together a book and things, you might start with an outline or a general idea. But what would you say is your passion project? Is it the role-playing games? Is it comic books?
Oh, both. I love doing both.
Mhm.
A lot of the role-playing books that I put out have a lot of story elements into them. The Steel Road's a good example of this. Whispers of Persephone has a lot of story elements in it. The Sinopa Omnibus volumes, those all have a short story for each of the characters that are described. So I think just storytelling in general is what really, really lights the fires in me for it. The thing about comics that's so different is that you, as someone who doesn't do the art themselves, you really have to surrender a lot of the vision and be very communicative with your artist, but still make sure that they have the freedom to really let themselves go and just produce the scene that's in line with their particular art styles. So that's how we end up with great pieces from 47 Furious Tales by Alexia. She took her reference images and then just really just poured her heart out into them. and produced some stunning pieces for that. So, for example, I know you've got issue 1.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that a lot of people talk about is when they first opened issue 1 is that monument to Asano Naganori right there. And then, of course, our first 2-page spread in the series, which is pages 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Just that sudden wow factor that just absolutely hits you, starts telling the story for you. So as a writer, trying to convey those to the artist, and then trying to keep your descriptions so that they're not overriding the art, so that your word bubbles aren't filling up a third of the panel or whatever. That's an important thing to try and keep in mind. Now, the fun part with 47 is that I approached this with the mindset as I kind of wanted to tell the story as I would think Akira Kurosawa would have told it. And his filmmaking style for his samurai films often had a lot of very silent moments in it, where just the action of the actors were what was really driving the story. And so when you read 47, you'll see that there are a lot of panels that are completely silent, and you're basically just filling that in from where the story was at before, what the narrative was telling you, and then carrying you through that visually, like you were just observing it in the third person as you're there. And I think that's how we got away with getting 47 Furious Tales issue 1 out, and people really liking it, because it really let them play the story in their minds without a lot of interference from the writer.
Well, let me ask you about your writing process then. How do you go about scripting that out, especially since I have the writer's brain, but I do, when I write, I see the images in my head. It just doesn't translate from that vision down my arms and onto paper. So, um, you know, conveying those scenes through a lot of words, because I'm a prose writer,
Right.
is a lot easier for me. But then trying to hammer that down and give art direction to an artist must feel a little bit overwhelming.
Um, I feel sometimes like I have to really stretch myself, because I'm dealing with people who are professionally trained at their craft. So I'm still playing catch up on terminology even today. So a lot of times, I'm sure that any of the artists in the bullpen will tell you this. Sometimes they really have to ask some questions like, is this what you mean, or is this what you mean? I'm like, okay, this is what I mean. Well, this is the term you're looking for. Okay, cool. Thank you. The conveyance of the scene, it took me a little bit to get into the rhythm of that. Thankfully, like I said, working with Alexia, we communicate pretty well. So when you're describing what was going on throughout the book, and then how that story flows from page to page, what we have is, I just to clarify, I also pay Alexia to edit the book. Again, professionally trained. I think it's a good idea. When that's laid out, I take and I cheat. Let me get this. I have a little set of paper. And so I'll take and I'll write down and segregate how I'm doing this, and look at how the story is going to unfold. And then that's like my rough draft outline anyone ever see, because it looks terrible. It's like stick figures and little C's and A's and letters and shorthand stuff all over the place. But then I try and make sure that it makes as much sense as possible before I translate it into an actual working script. And then the scenes that are described, I try to make sure that we have reference images from photographic references, or historical references, or whatever reference we're needing, so that it's more convenient for the artist. And the same is true for the RPG stuff. If I have an actual photographic reference or something like that, we try to get that to them. But trying to get into the hang of the storytelling, it took a little bit, because at first I was very, very guilty in the earliest 2 drafts of writing too much dialogue, or putting too much thought bubbles in, or things like that. and learning to just let go and trust the artist I'm working with to convey the sentiments through the body language that's being depicted by the characters. Once I kind of broke through to that, things became a lot easier for me. Now, there were times when we're going through the story and something in this book might not make sense to my artist until something happens in a future episode. And we saw that happen with the scripting for issue 3, when it's like, oh, so this is why that happened. I said, yes, that's exactly why that happened. Okay, cool. Now it makes sense. So that was actually very rewarding for me as a writer to see something pay off in book 3 that was nestled in book 1. So, you know, that's really
and for them to recognize it. And I think that's the really cool thing about working with a team that you've developed that relationship with, because eventually you build that shorthand. So when you're writing your script, there are some people we've talked to a lot of creators, and some are very specific. You know, it's like, well, this is how I imagine the scene. It's like it's widescreen, or it's panned down, or I want it up from this angle, and things like that. When you've got those ideas, you know, how do you put those down? Is it very specific per panel, or do you kind of say, well, this is kind of what I see and I trust you with it?
Right. I describe it from the point of view that we're looking at. So this scene is happening, and this is the vantage point we're looking at. And so a good example of this is you might see like one point of view is starting slightly above, and then the next one is a little lower. So it's almost like you're descending into the page as the narrative comes through, bringing you more on eye level with the characters. But being able to communicate that, and then the key thing as a writer is to listen to what your artist is telling you. So when your artist is telling you, this kind of feels a little clunky when you look at it visually, because it might sound great when you write it down, but if you rough it out and you're like, man, that's hard to tell, you know,
because they're not moving pictures.
Right, exactly. And so sometimes you have to kind of make adjustments for that. And that's another thing too, as a writer and any type of creative endeavor, really. When you're working as part of a team, you've got to learn to accept the feedback of the people you're working with. You've got to be able to look at that and objectively kind of say, is this really the best option for this? Is this really what we need to do? Or do we need to take, you know, a suggestion from Alexia or from Nick or something and make this change? And honestly, very often I'll take and I'll cede to their expertise. Very rarely do I say, no, this is for a very specific reason. And then again, that's usually one of those things that pays out down the road. But I try to give them as much direction as I can with regard to what the shot is encompassing, and what the emotive sentiments are for the characters who are involved, so they can, you know, work their magic on how they want to display those emotions, how they want to affect postures and things like that. But beyond that, not too much nitpicking. You know, try and let the artists have the freedom to really put their touch on it, to put their efforts into it. Like I tell every artist on every project I do, you know, whenever you do a project for me in Sonopa Publishing, I want you to do something that you can look back on 10 years from now and be proud that you did. You know, even if it's not your best work at that point, because you'll improve over time, but to look back and say, you know what, I'm really proud of what I did with that. And that has been incredibly rewarding to see people make that kind of effort.
Very cool. Well, we blew past our 30-minute mark. We're going to take a little bit of a break. I'm going to put up the card here. Everybody who is watching, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate every single one of you. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this out with your friends. We are speaking with, I should say, raging with William Sam Quinton. He's got 47 Furious Tales issue 3 right now on Kickstarter. Head over there and give it a little bit of love. We'll be right back after this. And for those who are tuning in, make sure that you write this down. Coupon code VOLT10. You can save 10% on your Gemini mailers by going to GeminiComicSupply.com and using coupon code VOLT10. Save a little bit of money, save your comics, get them to their destination safely. And that is courtesy of Indie Volt. Thank you to Varian Grant. We are talking with RAGIN with William Sam Quinton. This is episode 55. What? Get over to Kickstarter right now and check out 47 Furious Tales issues number 3. And I'm sure there are catch-ups there too. So if they missed out on 1 and 2, they can get over there and get caught up.
Yeah, we made this really easy to get caught up on. The first digital tier is issues 1, 2, and 3, and it's only $5. And then you can get print copies, issue 1, 2, and 3, with shipping in the United States included for just $25.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So I when I first received the books, I'm gonna hold up my books here. And I have the variant cover as well. So they're a little bit smaller.
Yep.
Than a traditional size. Yes. So what was the decision on doing that?
The 6x9 digest size is really a decision that came from 2 factors. One, it's kind of a throwback to a similar manga size. It's not quite manga size, but kind of close. And the other is that after all 12 issues are done, we're going to be printing it in a digest format. And we want to make sure that it's at an affordable price point for our audience. So after researching what we expect the page count to come out at and the price points, we're settling on a 6x9 digest size for that. And so we wanted to keep the comics in line with that and that similar manga size. And it makes for a fine, sturdy book, and we get to cram plenty of good content in there.
I like that. So you said 12 issues.
Yep.
Do you have everything written out already, and now it's just a matter of like kind of crowdfunding and getting the art done?
Yeah, pretty much. We've got the entire script's been done since before issue 1 was ever finalized on the finalized scripting. Issues 1, 2 are done. Issue 3 is fully scripted out and done. Issue 4, if you go into the outline, you'll see that basically everything's broken out between the pages. And now it's just a matter of laying out how the panels are going to read for those. And the same all the way through issue 12. Just kind of putting the finishing touches on it. Which is fun because hopefully I learn a little bit every book, is like at least what I keep telling myself. Learn a little bit every book and try and make sure that every book's better than the last. Is kind of the goal.
And you mentioned about putting these, eventually putting these together in a digest. And one of the things that I did notice was the lettering from book 1 to book 2 is significantly different. Yes. Is that something that you plan on remastering, or are you going to keep it as is when the time comes to put it all together?
When we take it to a digest, we'll remaster the lettering on issue 1. We're going to be keeping Brian Lee lettering the series going forward.
Okay, yeah, because it was just like, it was almost like, whoa, what happened? It's like I went from like my old eyes, kind of going, yep, okay, I got my bifocals are working. To all of a sudden it's like, okay, I can read it now. And so I was kind of wondering about that, because there are a lot of people who say, well, it was my early work and I kind of want to stay true to it because now people can see how I've grown, But that's okay for like issue to issue, I think. But when you're trying to put it together into a cohesive book,
you need it to be lettered consistently when you're in digest format. So yeah, we're just gonna have Brian re-letter issue 1 once we get to putting that together. So I mean, it's the price you pay for getting it done right. I mean, if you're not gonna do it right, don't do it. So
and there's always that learning curve. Dang learning curve. It's I'm constantly on one. I say stay uncomfortable, my friends.
And I learned that Alexia does not like to letter. So if I had known that for book 1, I wouldn't have had her letter book 1.
Gotcha. But have you ever tried lettering?
No, I'm not going to do it.
I have for my first 2 stories. Thankfully, they were small, short stories. Yeah.
Part of the problem is that I got stabbed in the hand in 1996, and my handwriting.
I'm sure there's a story there.
Yeah, the dude was trying to stab me in the neck. But
okay,
wow.
well, and my hand saved me.
yeah. I wasn't always a paralegal. Let's just put it that way. I used to have a very different career.
Mercenary?
Yes, yes, actually.
Oh my god.
Mercenary and high threat security specialist.
Nice.
Primarily with paramilitary security.
Oh, the stories you can tell.
Yeah, some of them I can't, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I got stabbed in the hand. On, of all things, a ridiculously simple domestic job, but that's where you got to be careful. In my experience, Americans are actually more dangerous than most armed foreigners, to me anyway. Because like when Americans start shooting, they aim first, and when not very many foreigners are of that mindset. In my experience, I'm not trying to be anti-foreigner or anything. You just gotta understand what my experience is.
Sure.
Which is one of the reasons I'm still alive. Is that people didn't take the time to aim.
My husband's ex-military. He's told me stories.
So yeah.
I totally get it. Kind of, sort of.
But yeah, I got stabbed in the hand, so my handwriting is absolutely atrocious. And,
okay.
I'll never be a letterer. It just won't happen.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it was more of a budget thing. So I said, I know I have the ability. I just don't know if I have the patience. And of course, Nita's in the room going, "Your tails suck." And I was like,
well, they did. Oh, they were awful. And they were all different sizes.
Not all of
them.
them.
In the wrong places.
See,
one was like a half a page long. And
see what I deal with.
See, I would literally have to use some type of software and have the software construct it, and that just would not be good.
But the beautiful thing about that was the ability to go in, and because I'm the writer and I'm like, oh, I'm lettering, I have the last hands on it to change anything, to fix it. So that was nice. That was nice to have that kind of power without going back and forth and kind of brokering edits and things like that,
right.
Because you know as well as I do, you can look at it 100 times and you'll miss one thing.
Yep.
And it'll be the one thing that you open. You're so proud to hold your book in hand. You're like, oh yes, it's perfect. Oh, what's that comma doing there?
you open it up and you're like, why is that spelled wrong?
Right. I know. It's like, but 10 other people saw this thing. Damn it. What's wrong here?
I had that happen real bad with Tale of the Wizard's Eye. I edited it, I sent it, and I had my proof copy back. And I came through and I sat down in front of it. And the very first page, I saw a word that was misspelled that got past my spell checker, got past me. I was like, okay. I went through and I found incorrectly spelled words or duplicate words like the on every single page.
Oh, geez.
So I'm like, well, at least we know that it's found. And I went through and fixed it. And then after that project, I made sure I had an editor on everything. So,
well, this last round, we had an apostrophe out of place.
There was an apostrophe, one apostrophe. And of course, it's like you turn to the page and there it is. It's like, pow!
Like as soon as it opened, it was like, oh, son of a bitch.
Right there, yeah.
There's always one. And, writing or any creative endeavor, it's like, it's never going to be perfect, right?
Yeah. I mean, I fell into a trap on Death Comes to Glenfollow of trying to write perfectly because I had written it over the course of 2 years and then accidentally saved over the file.
Oh.
During the Kickstarter campaign.
No.
Stab right in the heart.
Right. And my drive was synced to my desktop, and so it overwrote it. And so I literally had to take and pull all my handwritten notes and then rewrite. And it literally took me 2 years to write that book. So it was because I took my time.
And it's never the same the second time around.
It was never the same. And so I put it together and I formatted it, and I got into a problem with reformatting the book every week. And the book, it was the Kickstarter I had that actually ran horribly late. I just thank God that's fulfilled and that people are enjoying it. The backers were really patient, very supportive. It was one of those 2020 kind of things that really hit me right in the face. And there was a lot of other stuff that went down too. I had a couple of friends that died from COVID, and my neighbors across the street died from COVID, and the neighbor up the street died from COVID. And then 2 of my neighbors down the street committed suicide. It was
Oh my
it was
gosh.
a rough few months. It's like, yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
The neighborhood has been
That's
very
kind of
different.
like, yeah, you see the ambulance or the police driving really slowly and you're like, damn it,
Yeah,
who's next? Yeah.
yeah,
Ben, I've been through that. So yeah, not easy.
no.
And it's crushing. It's crushing to the soul and your energy and everything like that, you
It
know?
does. It'll take it right out of you. But thankfully, I had a lot of support from my friends and my family. The backers have been just so much help. You know, I let them know what's going on. They'd be like, "No, dude, it's all right." And we got it out there, and the book is really looks good. That book was illustrated by Tony Ojeda, and he just absolutely murdered it. Just did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're staying in communication with your backers, they
Yeah,
will be understanding for the most part. I mean, you might have one or two jerks, but you know, that's life.
yeah,
But speaking of crushing blows, you mentioned something about your first Kickstarter that was a failure.
yeah. My
Mm.
first try to fund
Yeah,
issue
what
one.
went wrong? What went wrong, and
Um,
what did you learn from it?
Everything went wrong, really. It was done in a hurry because I let my excitement get the better of me. We had a good script for issue one. You've read the book. We got excited about the book, excited about the art that was going on, and we threw together the campaign to try and get it funded so that we could get that production really rolling, right? Just jump in with both feet. And the reality of it is that when you're paying people fair wages for this level of work, you're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. So we had a $12,000 campaign goal, and we just could not get to it. We
Mm,
just couldn't. And we were getting up there a little bit. And as the campaign wore on, we had more people who dropped out because it was a long campaign. But we came back several months later, and having used revenue from sales from RPG stuff to help you know prepay for a lot of stuff, we were able to get issue one funded the second try.
mhm.
And then issue two, the first try for issue two, was actually really early in the pandemic spread in the US. And I think that was one of the things that really hurt us. We still had a big goal because we were trying to fund everything through the Kickstarter campaign at once. And that's just really hard if you're not seeing 300 or 400 backers to hit that kind of level.
Right.
And so we came back the second time, got it funded, got it fulfilled, and then with this one, just went ahead and threw as much money ahead of time as we could. So we came in with a much lower goal. We're 7,000 to get this funded. We're actually approaching the halfway point this first week, so I'm really confident that we're going to fully fund and probably start reaching up some of our cool stretch goals too. So really exciting.
Very good. And so the ketchup tail here we see for the 3 copies is
Mhm.
$25. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah, you get all three with the Veldhausen covers on those, and actually all the Veldhausen covers are signed. You get the
Hmm.
digital version of it, and you get the digital version of the artist edition, which is itself 92 pages. So that's a big deal.
Give us the genesis of 47 Furious Tales. Where in your brain did this come from?
Well, I've always been a big fan of the story of the 47 Ronin,
Hmm.
and this is that story told with anthropomorphic animals. But the strange spark that lit this was I was actually writing on another script and happened to be taking a break, and I was on the internet, and I saw this GIF of these two squirrels fighting with lightsabers,
Oh my goodness.
and I was just like, okay,
I
that's kind
love
of
it.
cool. And then the very next thing I saw was an image of a squirrel standing there with full samurai armor. And just for whatever reason, my brain went like that and said, I could tell the story of the 47 Ronin with squirrels, kind of like they do in Usagi Yojimbo or, TMNT.
Hmm.
And we could take and fill in like, the holes in the history with, some of the things that were going on in the period, and tell the actual story over the timeline it actually happened in, and not make it seem like it was just a long weekend. And
Right.
because it's basically occurs over the course of about 2 years, and being able to stretch and tell all the things that these guys were enduring as they plotted their vengeance, I think is a real strong indicator of just how deep this story runs. And when I pitched it out like that, Alexia, who is a huge fan of all things samurai, just jumped on it to get to it, and we've been making 47 Furious Tales since.
Yeah, I mean, it could have gone bad, like you said, like I was on a weekend bender. Don't ask me what I was smoking.
Right.
But the
stoners have plenty of great ideas.
Well, I work for the courts in a state where that's not legal, so that just never happens. But
but the art is fantastic. The storytelling is really compelling, and I mean, it really does capture your attention and keep it, while you're reading through it. And so I'm really glad, because it was just one of those things where I saw a squirrel. I saw the fuzzy head. I was just like, oh, I have to have that. And truth be told, I was a little bit surprised at how well the storytelling was, because for me, the covers captured my attention first. But it is the inside storytelling that will keep me coming back.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, we get mistaken for a kid's book a lot, and it's definitely not a kid's book.
Yeah.
We have
now, so how do you tell people that, who are determined to say, hey, comic books is art and words and it's all for kids? How do you respond when people come at you like that?
I think there are a lot of comics that are great for kids, and this one I would certainly be comfortable with teenagers reading. But like when I'm at a convention, and we've had this happen a bunch, where someone wants to buy a comic for a small child, and I'm like, this really isn't a comic for small children. There's a lot of violence in it. And I usually
there is blood.
Yeah, there's a lot of it too. So I usually refer them to other creators who are carrying, child-friendly titles. But I think that on one hand, comics really can be for everyone. But to make a comic that's truly for everyone, including the young reader, you have to forego some of the elements that are in this series, because this series leans very heavily on what actually was going on in history at that point. And so the bloodshed is, as we see here, blood splatters everywhere.
Yes.
And that kind of thing is written into it, because when people get stabbed, they bleed. I've unfortunately been stabbed several different times, so I can tell you it's never fun. But having survived 7 different stab wounds, that's 7 different times. It's not as bad as it sounds, but it's kind of getting old. That you bleed everywhere, and so that's just kind of part and parcel of it. And when someone gets a limb cut off or decapitated or something, blood splatters everywhere. And between that and just the violence in this, when someone dies in this, they're just dead. There's no siege perilous moment to bring them back. There's no isekai reincarnation to put them in another world. They're just dead as history, and that's where they lie. So we have to clarify that with this particular title. Now, other titles in the future, will have more all age bent, but this one's definitely teen plus, which surprises a lot of people, because when you look at the cover, it's like, oh, cute furry.
Yes, it's cute and furry, but see, I also like the dark and the bloody, so this appeals to me on so many levels.
Yeah, and there are some scenes that are probably pretty disturbing for folks. There's one in issue 2 where the bandits are where the Grey Wolf bandit is throwing a captive to his men, and that's a very disturbing image. Definitely not something you want to hand a preteen, but keeping it true to the period was important.
When you get the artwork for the first time, does it still blow your mind?
Every time we got well, if you scroll up a little bit, you'll see there's a piece that was done for page 1 of issue 3. It's still in inks on this one. And Alexia actually is not happy with that page. So she decided a couple of days before the campaign that she was actually going to redraw it, redraw the whole page. So,
Oh wow.
Yeah, she's just there's really like two little imperfections that she's not happy with. So she's literally going to redraw this entire page, which is what we have here.
This one?
Yeah, that one right there, where we have two of the bandits chasing after a civilian, just a regular villager, and she's trying to convey that when you're running in these type of narrow traditional Japanese dresses, running is not what these are made for.
No.
So trying
and neither are the sandals.
right. So trying to get away from bandits intent to do you harm is very, very difficult. And when this piece first came in, I was just absolutely stunned with it, and she's going to redo it, and
Wow.
because she's very much a perfectionist. And what we're going to do with the campaign itself is we're putting out pages. We'll put out more when Alexia comes back. Like I said, she went to visit family for a week, but we'll be putting out pages, and then
How dare you?
Pages.
Taking time off? What?
I know,
You
right?
can't do comics and have a life.
Right. Oh my
we'll
gosh.
be showing more colored pages when we're at towards the ending portion of the campaign. And then, of course, teasing those out to leading up to fulfillment. And the idea is kind of to, bring more immersion into the creation process this time, to show people more of what happens as the book is being made. And so our update yesterday had, of course, the interior illustration that was done by Adelia Gunderson on that update, as well as some images from Indietober, from Travis Gibbs' program, to help celebrate indie comics this month through art, and went and reached out to artists who had done 47 Furious Tales pieces and got permission from them to go ahead and put them in the update. And then I got several who communicated to me after that update was posted, and we'll add those in on the next update as well. But it was nice to see people who were familiar with the title to the extent that they could then turn around and sketch something out and just show something from the vibe they get from the title. Even Travis drew something, which was a rarefied thing to see, because Travis usually doesn't do that.
What's your reaction when you get like fan art and stuff?
Fan art is still something I'm kind of coming to grasp in my head that people would actually do. One of the persons who did one of the very first pieces of fan art I ever got was Warren Brown, and Warren is a simply remarkable artist, and it impressed me a lot, to the point where I actually invited Warren to take part in the Dungeons and Dames book that we developed. And so Warren contributed 4 pieces to that. Warren doesn't color because he's very colorblind, but his grayscale work is just absolutely incredible. And the people who've seen that, he gets a lot of compliments for his work in that book, because he put in some really fantastic details, to the point where you can be looking through some of these pages and you'll notice, hey, there's a scar there, or, oh, hey, there's looks like maybe there's a scale that's been injured on this snake and stuff like that. And people are appreciating that level of detail he sunk into it. So when I get the fan art from folks, I have to sit there and think, is this something that maybe I want to work with this person in the future too, because you see such remarkable things come out, and not being able to draw at all, I'm just usually wowed by all of it.
Mm-hmm. Pretty cool. Well, we are nearly at the end of our hour, and if it's all right, we'd like to play the video, and then we'll come back and we'll ask a final question of you.
Oh, love it.
So yes, hold on a second. Let me get this up here, and here we go. 47 Furious Tales, you guys. Head over to Kickstarter. We've got the links in our show notes. Here we go.
For 300 years, the story of the 47 Ronin has resonated throughout Japanese culture. 47 Furious Tales brings this epic to life with fierce samurai action and anthropomorphic animal characters in a beautiful 12-issue limited comic book series. Now, After 2 successful campaigns brought issues 1 and 2 to the world, we bring you issue 3 with 24 action-packed pages. Journey with us into the past and experience the beauty and ferocity of the age. Yoshio leads the samurai of Eiko against the brutal bandits of the Grey Wolf, while Lord Asano makes his final, fateful voyage to Edo. All is not ceremony and sake, for the life of the samurai is one steeped in war and death, honor and duty. Steel flashes and blood flows in 47 Furious Tales, Issue 3. Pledge today to get your copy of 47 Furious Tales Issue 3 and the Artist Edition, Volume 1, collecting the original hand-inked, unlettered art pages of issues 1, 2, and 3 into one beautiful volume.
And there we have it. This project is 42% to its goal, doing rather well. You've got 23 days to go. And let me get
we're still in our first week.
It
yes,
looks great.
It does. I am really excited. I want that art book. I want it so bad. Hey, Nita.
Yo.
We got to sell a kidney or something. To back all of these campaigns. So
I told you find a corner, Meredith. Damn.
I know, but I don't think my husband would like sitting on that corner. It gets kind of cold out there, you know. Oh, it's not going to be me. That's what he's for. Sam.
Yes.
If you were going to give a new person, a new creator, some advice, what would it be?
Never give up on your creative dream. Never. I actually used to write a lot of content and submit to publishing companies for role-playing games and fiction. And I had a bad experience, and then I stopped submitting completely. And then in 2017, after more than a decade of only writing stuff for my friends, I came back at it and just decided no one was going to stop me. And so I didn't bother submitting to anybody. I just created my own company. I created my own books. I reached out and did the absolute best I could with the crowdfunding resources that are out there. I asked a lot of questions and got a lot of help and met a lot of nice people who had me on their shows. So thank you, ladies. And just working very hard will eventually get you there. There is no substitute for hard work. And if you are creating something that you truly believe in, don't be afraid of that hard work. It doesn't matter if it doesn't succeed the first time. Keep working on it and come back the second time. And if it still doesn't work, come back again. I mean, I have other projects that didn't fund the first time, and they're still on my to-do list, and they're still being worked on, and they will see the light of day. So it's one of those things, like, if you never give up, you're never really defeated.
That's amazing. Amazing advice, and very, very good to keep in your mindset. You know, it's not an easy path, you guys, but it could be well worth it, because the creative endeavor should never end, you know. Right. But I've got my copies of 47 Tales, Furious Tales 1 and 2. 3 is available on Kickstarter, you guys. Make sure you get over there and back it. Get your catch-up tiers. If you don't have it already in your library, you really ought to. It's good stuff. I mean it. And on that note, you guys, this has been Ragin' with William, Sam, Quinton, episode 55. And we appreciate every single one of you for tuning in. Thank you very much. Hit the button. Hey, Nita.
Yo.
Final words.
Throw my dudes.
Bye. Hey there, this is Meredith Loughran with Ragin', and I wanted to let you know that we encourage and promote independent creators and their projects through organic interaction, consultations, and more. Visit Nita and me at RAGINAVC.com for details and contact information. Hit the button.